Hello, sweet friends. Welcome back. Today is September 2nd, 2020. I hope that you guys are having a great week so far. On this day in history, we have the Great Fire of London began in 1666, destroying more than 4/5 of the city. That is astonishing for the fact of on this day in history. So let us begin. We are going to start on our We Will and I Will objectives. So today we will complete the reading of pages 2 and 3 of our Social Studies Weekly and analyze our vocabulary. I will review my vocabulary and evaluate my knowledge by completing a forms. So I will touch base a little bit more on what exactly we're doing today after I let you guys know what your important message is. So your important message today is, guys, is that you are awesome. I just wanted to let you guys know that you guys are so awesome. I am so excited that you guys are my students. You guys have been so sweet and so amazing, and your personalities have been showing through the roof. I cannot wait to get to know you guys even more and see you guys eventually in the classroom. It is so, so exciting to be able to get to know you guys. So with that being said, let me share with you guys just a little bit about what we're doing today. So I'm going to turn the camera back on me. Hi, guys. So today we are going to be reading pages 2 and 3 of our Social Studies Weekly. So if you guys are able to, please open up your Social Studies Weekly through Clever. If not, you are more than welcome to just follow along with me. As long as you're following along and listening, you're doing all right by me. So we're going to read pages 2 and 3. We are continuing our early American settlements conversation. In the previous video, we kind of briefly talked about the missing colony of Roanoke. And I am so excited about some of y'all's responses. It was just great to see y'all getting so engaged into it. I cannot wait for you guys to come back to school so you guys can be a part of our historical investigation that we're going to have next week, all about the missing Roanoke colony. So since we talked about Roanoke yesterday, we're going to talk about some of the other early American settlements today. So I'm going to share my screen with you guys, and we are going to read over pages 2 and 3, and then we will go over the vocabulary. All right. Here we go. So this is pages 2 and 3 for you guys. So if you guys will just take a second and open up to it. If not, please follow along. I'm going to zoom in for you guys. All right. So we are starting with the title of Challenges and Successes of Early American Settlements. And I'm going to begin. So the Roanoke colony's failure did not cause England to give up hope. Many people were still committed to establishing settlements or many small communities in North America. In the early 1600s, England was far behind Spain and France in power. The English could not establish colonies just anywhere they wished. Spain already claimed South America, the West Indies, the Southwest region, and Florida. France claimed the areas around many important waterways like the Great Lakes and the Mississippi River. Much of the unclaimed land was harsh, rugged, and dangerous. The forests were thick, and natives often made it difficult for Anglo settlers to establish colonies. England began to concentrate on settling land along the eastern coast of North America. They had to plan the colonies very carefully. So like how we had previously said in week 1 when we were talking about the New World, Spain was excelling in sending out explorers. They were sending out multiple explorers, and they were doing very well for themselves on colonizing their own colonies. Now, France was having a little bit of a struggle, but France was ahead of England for sure. So England is in last place right now on this race to establishing amazing American settlements. So now we're going to move on to page 3. We are on the subtitle of Colonists Established Jamestown for Economic Gain. About 20 years after the failure of Roanoke, England's King James I gave permission for a group of men to form a company and establish a settlement in North America. The Virginia Company sent about 100 settlers, all men, to America in April of 1607. The men hoped to get rich by finding gold and other natural treasures. They chose a piece of land near a river and built their settlement. They named the colony Jamestown in honor of King James. They chose Virginia as the name of the land around the settlement. Life in the colony was difficult and hazardous. The water in Jamestown was dirty and not good for drinking. The marshland where Jamestown was built was not good for farming. Plants would not grow in the wet, soggy soil. Swarms of mosquitoes carried a serious and often deadly disease called malaria. The men focused most of their efforts on getting rich instead of hunting or growing food. Disease and hunger killed most of the colonists, and only 38 men survived. So we went from 100 settlers of all men to 38 men surviving. And that happened only 8 months after Jamestown started. So Jamestown was only going for 8 months when they lost the majority of their settlers. So let's continue. One man who survived the first year at Jamestown was Captain John Smith. Late in 1607, a group of American Indians captured Smith. They took him to the chief of their tribe, Powhatan. Many say that Powhatan's daughter, Pocahontas, saved Smith's life. Historians disagree about whether this story is accurate or true, but Powhatan did allow Smith to return to his colony. Captain Smith continued his relationship with Powhatan's tribe. The American Indians taught the colonists about hunting, fishing, and planting crops in this unfamiliar land. Smith was a good leader, and the settlers soon elected him president of the colony. Smith made sure everyone worked hard to keep the colony from failing. Only 18 died in the second winter. During 1608 and 1609, more settlers, including some women, arrived. Smith was burned badly in a gunpowder explosion and had to return to England. Soon the colonists were struggling to stay alive again. To keep them from starving during the winter of 1609 and 1610, many ate their own horses and dogs. Oh no. Only 60 people were left at the end of that winter. The colonists never became rich by finding gold or silver. However, they did find another way to get rich with a plant called tobacco. An Englishman named John Rolfe married Pocahontas and began planting tobacco, which grew very well in Jamestown soil and climate. This became the real gold of Jamestown. People in England bought as much of the crop as possible. Jamestown now had something to trade for food and supplies. Jamestown began to grow quickly as each man had land to farm. 200 more women came from England to marry the men and start families. In 1619, the colonists elected men to make laws for the colony. They called this group the House of Burgesses, which made up of mostly wealthy men. It wasn't the best type of government for the colonists, but the people now had some say in how their colony operated. They did not have this privilege, meaning freedom, when they lived in England. Unfortunately, the colony's successes did not continue. Colonists continued to begin to fight with Powhatan's tribe, and the price of tobacco dropped. Government leaders were not always honest, and many people died of disease. In 1624, King James took back the land and made Virginia a royal colony, which meant that King James owned Virginia. So we're going to stop there. And we're going to kind of just discuss a little bit about what we just read, and then we're going to go over our vocabulary. So we started talking about Roanoke in the last video, and now we are talking about Jamestown. So in 1607, I'm thinking of the Pocahontas song. I don't know how many of you have watched Pocahontas, but in the beginning, they sing the song, in 1607, we sailed the ocean sea for glory, God, and gold in the Virginia Company. Da, 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 da. I probably got that song a little bit off. I'm not the music teacher. We're going to have to get Miss Hanson to help us out with that. but that is the easiest way that I can remember that Jamestown was made in 1607, and they were sailing for glory, God, and gold, and they were sailing with the Virginia Company. The Virginia Company is the ones who sponsored their ship. So the Virginia Company is in England, right? Okay. They're the people supporting and sponsoring. Anyways, hopefully you guys got a laugh out of Miss Gonzalez singing very poorly. But we started with Roanoke. We came to Jamestown. So Jamestown was 16. Every time I say 1607, the song starts playing in my head. You guys need to go watch some Pocahontas. It's a little bit accurate, but not completely accurate, but it's still a great movie. So we have John Smith, who was the captain and eventually elected the president, was the one who was kind of just taking care of everybody in Jamestown. So Jamestown originally started with 100 settlers, 100 men. But 8 months later, they were only down to 38 men because a lot of them were dying from starvation, disease, and the mosquitoes that carry malaria. We'll talk about what malaria is when we go over the vocabulary. And so all these men unfortunately died, and they were only left with 38 within that 8 months. And then they started to see a bright side when John Smith became their president, and he started turning things around for them. Unfortunately, he got into a gunpowder explosion. Who does that? In today's time, that seems like a weird thing, but back in the day, they were constantly using gunpowder for weapons and for many other things. So it's kind of not a random thing back in that time. So today, it's kind of random. Like, how in the world do you get in a gunpowder explosion? Anyways, so he had to go back to England. And then we come back, and everybody's trying to make it happen for themselves. We're trying to get through it. We're trying to move along. And eventually, oh my gosh, Miss Gonzalez, slow down. I can't even say it. Eventually. There we go. Can't talk. So eventually we start to make more friendships. So the colonists are friends with the Powhatans, with the Powhatan tribe, and they are learning how to grow stuff because they've never had to grow anything before. They were very privileged in England, having the opportunity to not have to grow their own stuff. It was all imported to them and given to them. So now they had to come here and they had to start over. They had to figure it out for themselves, which is crazy to me. But that's how we start. That's how history happens, y'all. And so with that being said, they finally figured it out. They finally figured out, oh my gosh, we have this thing called tobacco, and it works perfect in our climate and in our soil. We can make this grow. And that is why you'll often hear the gold of Jamestown is referring to tobacco, because they finally found something that was going to be perfect for them because nothing was working in their climate. Because a lot of different types of farming doesn't work in certain type of climates, which we can get into more later on. But just to touch base, they found their gold basically, even though it's not gold. So eventually we started having more women come in. We finally got more women to come, and we got more families starting to happen. But this wasn't until about like 1619. So that was like 10 years later, they finally got it together and are able to bring in more settlers, mostly women, to start families. And so eventually, with the amount of settlers coming in, they had to create something that was going to keep order in their colony. So they created the House of Burgess. I feel like I say it wrong every single time, but the House of Burgess was, oh my God. Sorry, guys, you're going to laugh at me. I'm going to say things wrong, but the House of Burgess was mostly made up of wealthy men, and it wasn't the best type of government. Wasn't the best type of government for the colonists, but it was to help them operate for the most part. It was supposed to help them, give them a baseline of how to operate and to just be solid and figure it out. This was their baseline of how to figure it out, was by creating the House of Burgess. Unfortunately, eventually the colonists started to fight with the Powhatan tribe. And so then the prices of tobacco started to drop because they weren't having as much put into the tobacco process because they didn't have as much help anymore. And then eventually, in 1624, King James finally decided, look, y'all can't get a hold of this. I don't know what y'all are doing. I'm taking you back and making you a royal colony. So these settlers left England to have their own freedom, to be able to figure it out on their own and to get their own freedom. Okay. But then King James was like, no, y'all can't figure it out. You're mine now. So they turned into a freedom colony and then turned back into a royal colony owned by King James. Isn't that just crazy? Just all that roller coaster that Jamestown went through, just up and down and up and down. I mean, they were just constantly up and up and down, Miss Gonzalez. We get it. So now that we kind of just summarized quickly about what just happened and what we just read, I'm going to share you guys the vocabulary that was in these 2 pages. We're just going to briefly talk about it. I don't want you guys to stress out or feel like it's too much. I promise it's okay. So we are familiar with the word colony. We're familiar that it's a group of people who establish a settlement far from home, but they still maintain their ties with their homeland. We talked about that last week. So Jamestown is a colony, which eventually became a settlement because it became a small community with how many people they had. So settlement means a small community. So Jamestown was an early North American settlement founded by England in 1607. Again, 1607, we sail the ocean deep for glory, God. Okay, I won't hurt your ears anymore. We'll continue with vocabulary. So the marshlands. So we kind of talked about the marshlands a little bit in the reading, but the marshlands are low-lying wetlands, usually with grassy vegetation. So that was one of the problems that they were having with trying to grow things, was because the marshlands was not a good climate for them. Malaria. So malaria is an infectious parasitic disease spread by mosquitoes. So a parasitic is a parasite, which is mosquitoes. Mosquitoes are parasites, so they infect us with diseases such as malaria. Malaria was very, very popular, unfortunately, back in that time. And so that's what a lot of people died of back in the day. That's one of the reasons they went from 100 settlers to 38 within 8 months. Tobacco. Tobacco is a green plant native to North America whose leaves can be dried and smoked. So this was really popular for distribution because it was something that was accepted back in the time. I don't know how to properly bring that about to you guys. It can be a smidge inappropriate, but this is history, so we do have to touch base on some things that helped our history, which is crazy. Tobacco is typically found in cigarettes. So back in the day, tobacco was found in pipes, which is what they usually used back in England. And eventually they started putting it into cigarettes. So tobacco is the ingredient that makes most of cigarettes and the powder substance that's put into pipes. The House of Burgess. Oh, Miss Gonzalez is not good at this word. My goodness. The House of Burgess. Oh, my Lanta. I'm killing myself with this word. The House of Burgess is the first representative government group in America. So if I ever ask you what was the first representative government group in America, you need to think of the House of Burgess in Jamestown. Don't think of anything recent, because anything recent was made recently. This was the first one. This was the first government group that represented a huge group of people. A royal colony. So a royal colony is any colony ruled and administered by a sovereign, so by the king. So we talked about how Jamestown was originally just a settlement, a small community that was to enable the freedom of these people away from England. However, King James decided, nope, you can't do this. I'm gonna take you over now, and we're gonna make it work my way. So that is what the royal colony is it's ruled and administrated, oh my Lanta, Miss Gonzalez, administrated by the king. The Church of England. So the Church of England is the National Church of England. Separatists. So separatists are people who advocate separation from the establishment, especially a church. So the separatists would be against the Church of England. Pilgrims. Pilgrims are a devoted religious person who travels on a quest. Harvest. Harvest is a collection of foods, especially those grown as a crop. Indentured servant. Indentured servant is someone required to work for his or her freedom. A slave is a person forced to work for another and considered property. So now that we kind of just went over the vocabulary, most of that vocabulary was in pages 2 and 3. However, those last few are in the bottom section of the pages 2 and 3, which we are going to go over in the next video because it's very, very important because we talk about Thanksgiving. We talk a little bit more about slavery because this is when slavery was starting to happen. And so we're going to go into that in the next video. But for just today, I just wanted to focus on our early American settlements because it's very important that we know where we started. Okay, it's very important to know that we started with a mysterious Roanoke colony that just disappeared and we have no clue why. And then it's also important to know that one of our first roller coaster successful American colonies was Jamestown, which was in 1607. But it's very important for you guys to know this type of history. It's very important that you know how America was built. And it is my job to help you guys as much as possible to realize and to understand how our country came to be. And this is how it came to be, was explorers coming from all sorts of countries and building all these little settlements. So I hope that you guys were able to find my humor of not being able to say certain words interesting, and I hope that learning about Jamestown was interesting for you guys. I wish you guys were here in the classroom so I could assess you a little bit better and actually see how interesting everything is to you guys. History is an amazing thing, I promise. One of these days when you guys get back in the classroom, we're going to make it so much more exciting, and it won't just be me just reading off the Social Studies Weekly to you, I promise. So I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your classes, and I cannot wait to see you guys in the next video. So have a good day, you guys. Bye.